Jesus is gathered with his disciples on the last evening, it turns out, of his earthly life, and is sharing with them for a number of chapters, actually, but we'll just take a peek at these few verses today. Philip said to him, "Lord, show us the Father, and we will be satisfied." Jesus said to him, "I have been with you all this time, Philip, and you still do not know me? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'? Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. But if you do not, then believe me because of the works themselves. Very truly I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do. And more than these, in fact, you will do greater works than these, because I am going to the Father." Listen with the Spirit and with understanding. Well, I was going to show you Barbara's book again, but I've misplaced it, it looks like. At any rate, we continue today the series from Barbara Nixon's book, Things I Wish Jesus Said. And today we have two gospel stories. One of them, the first, the story of the miracle healing of the 10 lepers, I think actually is today's lectionary passage for the gospel reading for today. And as it turns out, it works very well with the lesson and the topic that we're dealing with today around miracles. We have Jesus encountered by 10 lepers who have been ostracized, taken out of the city, out of acceptable company, away from the pure people so that they wouldn't spoil them or render them impure, which is what happened at the time. That we still do that with some people today, but that's another story. And so these people were outside of the community, beyond the reach of the holy people, of the priests to render care to them. They may or may not have been actual lepers, as we understand what leprosy is today. They more likely probably had psoriasis or eczema or other skin diseases or rashes of some kind. Some may have had leprosy, we don't know. But any impurity rendered you unfit for the community. And so when they saw Jesus, they must have heard of Jesus, and seeing him, they knew that he was a rabbi, a holy man, and so they pled to Jesus, "Please render a cure to us, heal us, Jesus." And you heard the passage read. Jesus said, "Well, just go up to the temple and show yourself to the priests, and it'll all be good." And they were just tickled pink because that's not supposed to happen. But they got this special deal from the rabbi, and so off they went. And while they were going along the way, they were healed. They realized, just on the way. And one of the 10 came back and said, "Hey, Jesus, that worked. That he didn't go to the temple. He came back to Jesus, who rendered the miracle, and said, 'Thank you.'" And Jesus said, "Well, your faith has made you well," and so that was a good story. But what are we to make of that story? What are we to make of the miracles that we hear about, that Jesus performed, that God performed? The healing of 10 lepers, that is a great thing, and so we make of that something good happened, of course. But then if we set that beside the passage out of John today, where Jesus says, okay, you know how I did some pretty cool things? You're going to do even cooler things, even greater works than me. So what are we doing that is greater than healing 10 lepers? What would be greater than that? God bless you. Yeah. I've taken the trouble of coming up with a few ideas for you along this line. You may have thought of some yourself. I would think it would be a greater work if somehow people overcame religious rules that rendered certain people unclean and unfit to be around others. That might be a greater work. I would render it or identify it as a greater work, perhaps, if we were to develop a consciousness of us that accepted all people, regardless of their state or condition. I might consider it a greater work as well if we developed a health care system, not a health insurance system, but a health care system that actually cared for all the people, that actually devoted a lot to research so that diseases were cured, and that actually helped establish preventative measures. All of those things, don't you think, would be greater works, or at least somewhere on par with what Jesus is talking about? I don't know if those would be miracles. Maybe so. I think that they're within our grasp. We can't explain miracles in the normal way one might explain phenomena, whether they be biblical miracles or otherwise. But we're kind of like that Supreme Court justice who a number of years ago, when the court was considering pornography, said, "We know it when we see it." Okay, we know a miracle when we see it. We know one when we encounter it ourselves in our own lives. I'll tell you the truth without going into a long story about it, but I consider myself a miracle, not because of anything that I've done or deserved, but just the fact that I'm able to stand here today and to be with you or to be with anybody today. The statistics say I should have died a few years ago. I've had 3 different kinds of cancers and 13 different operations, and I'm still able to sit up and take nourishment. I wake up every day on the right side of the grass, and so I consider myself, for some reason, a miracle in that regard, and because of that, I find that when I'm awake, whether literally or figuratively, because sometimes I'm walking around and I'm not really awake and aware, but when I'm awake, I see miracles everywhere. I see miracles happening all the time around me. And if it's not a full miracle, I see a miracle in process that's happening all the time around me. Again, when I'm awake. It does help to be awake, to be able to see such things. But building one's faith around expecting miracles, well, that can be problematic. That can become a cautionary tale. I know of many instances of such things, and maybe you do as well. I'll mention one that happened in a Midwestern state at a church that is known to be kind of charismatic and fundamentalist, and it draws tons of people to it. Tragically, one of the families had a child who died unexpectedly, and a personal friend of mine went to the funeral for that child at that church. My friend doesn't normally go to that church, is a little uncomfortable at that church, but that's, churches, we have a great variety because we have a great variety of people. At any rate, during the service for this child who died so tragically, at one point the minister came down from the pulpit, stood beside the casket, and opened it up, and there lay this young child who had been embalmed as one would expect and prepared for burial. And the pastor, having opened the casket up, invited the family, in fact insisted the family come up with him, and then any other friends that might want to come up and gather around the casket and put their hands on the casket, because they were going to raise this girl back to life. That a miracle was going to happen right there and then. This girl was... You can guess what may have happened. Actually, nothing happened. The girl did not, of course, raise to new life. I grant you that's an extreme case, but not all that extreme, because there are many places where things in that ilk take place. And I consider that spiritual malpractice. That's the kind of thing that shatters the faith that people have in God. That's the kind of thing that makes people think, well, God is a fake. No, it's the minister who's the fake in that case. But how could they think otherwise? It can become a cautionary tale when we build our faith around the expectation of miracles. Believing myself to actually be a miracle, not of anything that I did. In fact, I probably did a lot of things that made the miracle of me being here today even harder, but still, that makes it that much more of a miracle. But sometimes people who experience a miracle, and those around them who see them experience a miracle or know of that experience, can have a false pride that they're special, that they are recipients of that miracle because they are somehow blessed especially by God. They've been rewarded for their own goodness by God, and meanwhile those who were not recipients of that miracle, well, they've been rejected. They're not quite as worthy, you see. And in that case, people come to understand that God cares for some people, but not for others. And it makes it easier to throw those lepers outside the town limit and keep them there. You may have seen on cars over the last several years a bumper sticker that says, "Expect a miracle." And you know that I like the hopeful sense of that. But you know, my experience is most bumper sticker theology is pretty thin gruel when you get right down to it. It's pretty thin stuff. And yet the idea of miracles, it does raise some questions for us. I bet it's raised questions at different times in your own mind. I know it has in mine and others. How could it not when we read scriptures that show us stories of Jesus and of God and of God's servants whipping out miracles as if they were a dime a dozen. How do they choose who gets a miracle and who does not get a miracle? How do they choose? And how do they decide when and where? Did you ever wonder if Jesus ever tried to perform a miracle and it didn't work? Just saying. Did you ever wonder if somebody asked Jesus for a miracle and he denied them? A favorite question that atheists raise around the topic of Jesus and miracles is, why were there no stories in any of the Gospels that show Jesus restoring an amputated limb on someone? Were miracles just a way to draw attention or to make a point? Or were miracles a point in and of themselves? These aren't questions that we get to wrestle with too often. Nobody in Scriptures asked Jesus about those, and that's why I joined Barbara in saying I wish Jesus said, don't expect miracles. Don't expect a miracle. Many Christians believe that miracles are the prime way in which God moves in the world, giving special dispensations to those who are most faithful. And yet we've all known extraordinarily faithful people whom we've prayed for and who have prayed for themselves to be spared an outcome that was not a preferred outcome, whether it be in life or of life, and yet who died anyway, or who experienced the worst anyway. And we've known people who never pray, who aren't people of faith whatsoever, who seem to have experienced a miracle of some kind or another in their lives. God can seem awfully fickle at times, if not entirely capricious, when some get a miracle and others don't. When some seem to be saved for a higher purpose and yet others are not. Is it because they weren't good enough? Did they not pray hard enough or work hard enough in the church or in the community? Are people who are homeless or starving, are they not worthy of God's attention? Is it just that it's not God's will for some of us to be blessed in those ways and others are to be blessed? Is that God's will? So what is a miracle? Different people would probably define it different ways. One definition would say that when God intervenes in an extraordinary way, that's a miracle. But I rather like Barbara Nixon's definition that she offers in her book, and it goes like this. She says that miracles are positive encounters with the mystery of God, making the impossible seem possible in the moment. They're extraordinary and sacred moments of grace that bring joy and transformation. Do you hear that? Do you like that one a little bit better? Let me say it again. Miracles are positive encounters with the mystery of God, making the impossible seem possible in the moment. They are extraordinary and sacred moments of grace that bring joy and transformation. Of course, they're also seemingly random and not very easily explainable. We pray around miracles. Prayer is woven within the very fabric, it seems, of our understanding or lack thereof about miracles. Sometimes it seems as though our prayers, that my prayers, or that your prayers, or that our prayers together have a direct correlation to a particular outcome. We prayed, it happens. But that isn't what happens all the time, is it? In fact, more often than not, that doesn't seem to be the way that it works. Other times, such correlation is not evident in the least at all. Barbara makes an interesting comment, and she says that wherever she has served as pastor, she has always told her congregation the same thing. She says, the content of our prayers do not matter. I see a few eyebrows arching upward. Come on, it's going to be all right. We'll get through this. She said, the content of our prayers don't matter. Whatever words you use to pray, they don't matter. If you choose not to use any words, that's okay. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, or the words themselves, she says, don't matter. And then she goes on to illustrate what she means by sharing a poignant story about her own father who was terminally ill. And visiting with him in the hospital, she said she prayed fervently for more time. She just wanted more time with her dad, and we can all understand that. We've probably all said similar prayers to that. She wanted more time. And yet she also knew that her father was likely praying that he go quickly and smoothly and sweetly. Two prayers in direct opposition to one another. And yet she said that in conversation and with her father, in the time that they did have, that they both came to feel an amazing sense of peace about what was going on. And that made all the difference. The words don't matter. It's just the plain, honest, unvarnished truth of who we are and of what we feel that opens our hearts to let God's love flow in and through us and into the world. And in so doing, to flood the world with miracles and moments of transformation that we may or may not ever know about. Jesus was so open to God that God's love flowed through him. And people experienced God in and through him, so that their hearts opened up to be recipients of God's love. So Jesus was not just a miracle worker, but Jesus was himself a miracle. And what he brought to people's lives. And Jesus invites us to do the very same thing and even greater. He invites us to live passionately and freely and to do even greater works than these. And so when you or I, when any of us open ourselves in prayer, whether it's a silent prayer or whether we cram all sorts of words into it, when we open ourselves truly and honestly with what we truly feel and experience, our hearts can open up and let God's love flow into us and through our lives. And then whatever happens when it flows into the world is beyond our control. We don't know where it's going to go or what miracles it may produce. But we do know that miracles happen, whether we see them or not, whether we experience them or not. And that our lives can offer an encounter with the mystery of God in other lives that we come in contact with. And if we can help bring joy or transformation to someone else's life, then we no longer have to hope for or expect a miracle, because we, you, us, we become like Jesus, miracles ourselves. I see miracles everywhere I look. Did you know you're a miracle? Give God thanks and let the love flow through you. Amen.